All right, live podcast, Dan. Always nice to get over here to the office, and especially as we're coming into season. So I thought today's was a great show.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we're thinking about where we're going to be the third week of September. Where's our mindset going to be? What are the failures that we're going to run into or have, and maybe some successes too?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, what headspace, mindset, what we're going to feel like day 5, day 6, day 7. And then also, I thought you did a good job of like some of your questions of like, what are some of the challenges you've faced or found yourself into? And we were able to dive into some of those challenges. It made for a great episode.
It really did. You know, stuff that, you know, we come to these podcasts not really knowing what we're going to talk about, you know, a lot of times. But, you know, as we talk, it's amazing, you know, some of the information that spurs into all these rabbit trails that are very pertinent, and it gets me fired up and excited. And it's like, oh yeah, this happened before. And actually this has happened a lot. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, there's a ton of tidbits like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's why I love this podcast, man. Well, we'll get right into it. Just want to thank a couple sponsors for today's show. So I want to thank Team Lodge for their support. Man, Dan, you have a bunch of experience using these. Used it for guys' moose hunt last year.
Yeah. So Team Lodge, for those of you guys that don't know, it's built off the design of those trailers that you can set down on the ice to go ice fishing out of the Midwest. But they basically custom build these trailers to fit the needs of the hunter. You know, they're all toy haulers, and there's all these different models, from smaller ones to, you know, the Grand Lodge, these big lodges. But they're trailers, they're custom trailers, but they're not overdone, and they're built really well. And they are bomb-proof. You set them down on the ground, and man, you could fall asleep in there, and a grizzly bear could be shaking that thing or crawling on top. You would never know, because they're soundproof, they're so tight, and they just don't shake around. But they're just designed with the hunter in mind. You know, the space inside these trailers, and the usage of, you know, the bunk beds and the sinks and the storage areas. And then of course it's an open design, so you can haul in a four-wheeler or a side-by-side or dirt bikes. You know, we've done it all. So they're kind of an all-around hunter's style trailer. I appreciate them because they're not built cheaply like most camper trailers. Like, they're built rugged, they're built with the hunter in mind, and that's why, you know, I love them. And don't get me wrong, I'm a backcountry hunter, but not all hunts are backcountry hunts. Guy's moose hunt, for an example, I think we were 13 days out there, and it's nice when you're, you know, in the middle of October and it's cold and raining or sleeting, and you have that lodge to come back to. That's pretty handy. It's a little bit more cozy than a tent. So yeah, when I don't have a backcountry hunt, it sure is nice to be in a Team Lodge trailer.
Yeah, it's yeah, I love the backcountry hunts as well, but my season's a mix and match. In a lot of these places, I'm hunting roaded areas as well. And to have a nice base camp, like to have a nice base camp that you can come back to, where you can shelter any weather, and also you just don't have a bunch of setup and cleanup and, you know, setting up a wall tent and the frame and the stove and the whole deal. It takes forever, you know, and it takes away from the hunt. So when you can just drop that thing and have an instant base camp, it's pretty handy. So yeah, those guys are doing great work. And he mentioned if you mention the podcast Life of a Bowhunter, he'll buy you a rifle or a bow. So make sure that you mention us when you go in there to get a Team Lodge, for sure.
That's right. You heard that right. Michael at Team Lodge. Yeah, you go in there and mention the podcast, and you can say Dan and Brian said so. But yeah, if you buy a trailer, you get a free custom rifle or free bow.
He mentioned it in passing, but we're going to hold him to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, thanks to those guys for their support of the podcast. I also want to thank Cutter Stabilizers, Earl Stroll. He's a small business owner, started this out of his garage, but he's really went through the research and development of really testing these stabilizers and making them the absolute best he can on the connection points. They're a carbon fiber, small diameter, so they don't blow around in the wind. And then you can change those weights by 1 ounce on the front bar. He's got a side bar mount, a back bar, all different lengths, and then you can really adjust your setup to get the right hold or the right preferences for your weight, your hold, your reaction of the bow. So really like these guys. I really like Earl, and they're building a heck of a set of stabilizers. So really happy with them.
Yeah, it's I appreciate the design of Matthew's bridge lock of the stabilizer that slides in and out, but with Earl's little quick detach on there too. I don't know if you use it as well, but
I do.
Yeah, you have a little quick detach for your stabilizer that makes traveling so much easier. Like I appreciate about the product. Not only is it effective, but that quick detach is pretty sweet.
Yeah, in the quick detach, do you have the one where you can also put it in and then the stabilizer faces up on the bow and screw it tight there?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can store the stabilizer upright on your bow, so you don't just have your stabilizer riding around on the seat of your truck or riding around in your bow case where it can screw out. So I do like that getting in the rig. It takes me 2 seconds and I can put my stabilizer up, and so it's not riding on somebody's lap or something. So yeah, really good designs with this stuff.
Yep. Small companies, great customer service, and great design. It's like these guys think everything.
Yep, 100%. So yeah, go check them out over at Cutter Stabilizers. And as far as us, Dan, I watched your elk hunt. Just what a phenomenal show and edit on that thing, and gets me all fired up for September. So if you guys haven't left for your September elk hunt, make sure to go check it out on Eastman's Hunting Journal, Beyond the Grid, and check it out on YouTube. But what a great hunt, great edit, great bull, great footage. Man, it was a really cool episode.
Great adventures, Beyond the Grid, of course. New season coming up. Well, we're in the middle of it, and we're gonna have new drops too. We have guys Shiras Moose hunt gonna be dropped here. Actually, it'll be dropped by the time you guys are listening to this. So it's unbelievable. It's a Boone and Crockett Shiras Moose from Wyoming, and my brother, he arrowed a bull. There's actually a 2-part series. So get this, you didn't get to see it. I'll show you today in the office, but I called this bull in for my brother, and he shot it, and it ran up to me unknowing, but this bull's double lunged. And so it's like a different, it's graphic, right? But it's a different view of, what happens after the shot. And you're not going to believe what happens, but that's going to be in the next episode dropped here at the end of August too. So yeah, tons of exciting episodes coming up on Beyond the Grid. Some great deer hunts coming up from you as well in November. So we're in the middle of season 7 of Beyond the Grid. So super exciting times for that. And then the courses, right? The Deer Collective, the Elk Collective, our online courses. Save 50, that's our code right now, and that's half off each course. So take advantage of that. What am I forgetting? The magazines. We're still writing for the magazine, Bowhunting Journal and the Hunting Journal. Get yourself subscribed for that. Your name goes in the hat to win hunts. We're giving away like 6 hunts now. So yeah, we're doing big things here. And all the podcasts around the company as well, with Eastman's Elevated with you, and Todd over there at Wingman, and Ike has his podcast, Eastman's Hunting Journal's podcast. So a lot going. Check it out. We appreciate
Jim
it.
Huntsman. We were just on that
That's
one.
right.
That's a great elk episode. We kind of were both on that one with Jim. He's a really good interviewer. It was a great episode.
It was, the Western Huntsman. That's another great podcast. We enjoy Jim, and just a good listen, and it's a different style too, and some more really good information came out of both of us as we were talking with Jim, and it's a 3-person dynamic there. So it's just a little bit different. You get even more bang for your buck with information that rings out of us.
Yeah, that's it. So thanks a bunch, you guys, for the downloads, support of the podcast. We really appreciate it. And then pulling for your guys' success this season. So let's get into this podcast. Great information for mid-September.
Heck yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Yep.
You guys are going.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah.
All right. Rock and roll. Live episode.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, always a good thing. It is crazy that we can get together here with season closing in.
It is, yeah.
Yep.
Coming down to the wire here. And a couple times a year we meet up, get together. Mm-hmm. They're fun.
Oh, 100%.
It's easier in person.
Yep. And you're leaving on your antelope hunt here in a couple days. So I think we covered that last episode. We talked about antelope, and then I think this will come out during season. So spoiler alert, or a little behind the scenes, like me and Dan will both be elk hunting, I'm sure, by the time this comes out. So yeah, just getting fired up for season, and just thinking of like giving guys any of those tips that they can really use during September.
Yeah. When I think ahead and I think of where I'm going to be at, say September 20th, September 25th, hopefully I got a 350 bull under my belt.
You usually do.
I got a few tags this year, so I'll be elk hunting my butt off. But yeah, it's it's a grind, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. That's kind of how I look at things too, especially with multiple hunts. But it's a mental game. That's all it is. Bow hunting's a mental game, right? We've talked about this, and especially once you're in days in. 1, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10 days into a hunt is mentally taxing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the ultimate test of endurance. Like I think like one day of hard hunting, or I think, I really had like all these thoughts yesterday I was running. It was my third day in a row running. I got in a really good one, and then it just felt right. Like I kept going. I was feeling really good, thinking about hunting in Colorado and then hunting elk, and I was just so I came back in the dark and trying to avoid cactus with like the light on my phone, but it just felt right because we're getting close to season. But you're right. It's such a mental game, or a matter of attrition, or like keeping your head in the game. Like we know we're going to face challenges this year. We're just not sure what they're going to be yet, but there's going to be hurdles and challenges, and whether that's hunting pressure we run into, whether that's the bulls aren't bugling, whether that's we get a gnarly snowstorm that comes in, or rain that comes in, or like we're going to have to just adapt. And these days can be really long, and especially in elk season, it seems like you get action in the morning, action in the evening, but you've got about 8 or 10 hours of nothingness that happens. And you do pretty good middle of the day, turning up critters, or I do like making a plan for evening or trying to, but really the middles of the days can be slow. So yeah, it is just about keeping your head in the game.
It is, especially in this day and age of everything is so fast-paced and instantly gratifying, right? But bow hunting, spending the time out there, the days, everything slows down so much. And so I know for me personally too, once I get into the swing of things, I was going to say it's a learning curve, but it takes a few days. It takes some time to get back in the groove, And before you go into a hunt, anticipation's high, excitement's high, hopes are high, everything's high, and then you get a couple days into it, then you realize, okay, this is a grind, or it's not going how I hoped, or it's slower than it usually is, or whatever these things that are thrown at you that really kick your mental psyche to the curb and makes it tough. And so going into this, knowing that's how it's probably going to be, that helps me prepare a little bit better, especially for that first hunt of the season.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think you got to get your mind right and prepare yourself for it, and prepare to keep yourself up. Like a positive mental attitude goes a long ways. And so when I'm on these hunts, I just try to stay immersed in the hunt and present, like thinking what my next move is, thinking if I'm not finding animals, where am I going to move where I can find animals? If I do find hunting pressure, a different direction I can go to get away from the hunting pressure. Just keep like theorizing and thinking and coming up with that next thing I'm going to work on, and also like elk hunting, I focus mornings and nights, and that's where my effort needs to be put. It doesn't do me any good to hike 10 miles in the middle of the day. Like I really want to put that effort towards morning and towards night. And you're right that we got to get back into the rhythm of the woods, and we work so hard all these days to be productive in the middle of the day and get things done. But that starts to change, where now you need to wake up at 5 a.m. and you need to put those miles on early and go hard for elk, and then go hard at night. Make sure that your afternoon play, you're in a spot where you can find elk, hiking out in the dark, and maybe even looking for elk in the dark to try to locate them. And middle of the day, I take some great naps in the middle of the day. Like you also have to take care of yourself, and you don't want to grind yourself into the dirt.
Right. And those naps, or that idle time, that's still very calculated time as well. Because for me, and I know you're the same way, if you're not, thinking about your next move or the next couple moves, and you're just sitting idle, like there's something wrong. Like you have to keep those wheels turning, and it's a fine line, because you don't want to overthink things either. and you don't want to get yourself in a bind or miss an opportunity because you're overthinking things. But I like to make the most out of each and every day that I'm hunting, because you only have so many per hunt. And yeah, I don't like taking days off in the middle of hunts. So I hunt accordingly though, but you're always, trying to figure out the next move that you're going to make before it happens, and just be resourceful, right? That's a huge thing. So you have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. On every hunt I end up, well, not every hunt, but on a lot of hunts I end up on like plan M or N, way down the list, because I'm just striking out everywhere. But I think that's very important, once you get 4 or 5 days into a hunt, that you're sticking, you have your plan, you're sticking to a schedule, you're sticking to what you have to do to get it done, even if it's hard to do it because you're beat down physically, you're beat down mentally, but sticking to the plan or the program. And that's ultimately what it takes to be successful, especially on these longer duration hunts.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thinking of your next move is huge. And I also, like, on these hunts, it's like you get it's tougher when you're out there. It's like one thing to talk about it now, but when you're beat up and you're 4 days sleep deprived and driving all night and you haven't seen an elk for a couple days, like, things start to change, and you start to make like mounds or molehills into mountains. Like, all of a sudden, a problem that you have at the house, or maybe your water heater goes out, or maybe at work you get a troubling text or an email. All of a sudden, this problem seems huge back there because you can't handle it or do anything about it. And so it just like festers. And all of a sudden, that fester, it can start to be all you think about. And pretty soon, you're like, well, I'm not seeing any elk anyways. What am I even doing out here? I'm just going to go home and take care of this. And it never fails, any of these problems, if I go home to take care of them, it seems like I can have them all taken care of in a day. It's like I feel like I just make these problems bigger than they need to be when I'm back there. So I just need to remember that I've been waiting all year for this. I've been training all year for this. And whether I'm successful or not, I am going to give it my all on this hunt, because I know that my luck can change in a moment, or I know that I'll beat myself up worse if I go home and then feel bad about quitting. Like, that's going to be a rough few days, or of a rough off season as well. Like, we prepared for these days. We've prepared our family. We've prepared work. Everybody's ready for us to be gone. Like, just remember to keep with it. And it's not that big a deal. I'll just handle it when I get home. Problems aren't that big. They seem bigger. My wife's still going to love me when I get home, hopefully, But you know what I mean? Like, my wife, my kids are still going to love me. They're out here, like, they're taking care of things at my house for me to be out here and enjoy what I love to do. So I just need to keep those positive vibes, as positive thoughts in my head, and just remember it's not that big of deal.
Yeah. This is your Super Bowl, right? This is what you wait all year for. This, September is what we live for. And that being mentally tough is what it's all about. And you bring up a good point. I mean, ultimately it's personal management, personal mind management, and just management in general. But, everything seems more of a problem than what it really is when you have all this free time to dwell on it. And I think we've seen examples of that in modern society. We have it so easy. Living is easy. Surviving is so easy. So we're not worried about food, water, shelter. So we have to worry about something else. And this is kind of a rabbit trail. But, that's why society is creating all these problems now. Now, we can't even decide if we're a boy or a girl, right? I mean, this is how crazy the human mind is very interesting. Mm-hmm. But when you have all this free time on your hands, you become your own worst enemy. That's the point of this. You become your own worst enemy, and you start overthinking things and creating problems when really it's just a molehill. Mm-hmm. It's a molehill. Mm-hmm. And so, bringing it all back, around, it's like, this is our Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. This is what we live for. And 7, 8, 9, 10 days into it, it's difficult. It is. And I'm going to miss Dean, and I'm going to miss my wife. But ultimately, 1 week in the grand scheme of things is so short. It's such a short amount of time. 2 weeks is even, just a short amount of time. And that's why, and we're blood brothers, obviously, but we like to suffer, right? And suffering is actually good because not only does it build character, but it makes you so much more mentally stronger for your bow hunts and your hunts. And so if you've suffered in the past, you've built this resilience, you've built this toughness, and you're going to be that much stronger and a better bow hunter when you hit those 7, 8, 9, 10 days out. And that's ultimately what matters to setting yourself apart from the rest of the crowd, is how resilient are you? That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, man. I just want to keep that same energy on my hunts, like this fired up, this driven, this my Super Bowl, like this is the most important thing. Like we've been training all year round and preparing for this. And like you say, it's a short amount of time. And I just want to keep the same energy to put full effort and do everything in my power to try to find success. And so I just want to say yes on these hunts. Yes to going over the next mountain. Yes to checking out this next basin. Yes to diving down in this deep hole. Like whatever it takes, I just want to keep that same energy and just keep that in the forefront of my brain. Like, a long-term goal is to be successful with my bow and arrow. And this long-term goal of being successful with my bow and arrow, I'm gonna have to rely upon my mental toughness, my resilience, my perseverance, my persistence, like all of these things, all these traits that I've worked my whole life for, they're gonna be tested. Like I am gonna get down on a hunt, or like I think about, there's gonna be, not only is there gonna be challenges, I'm also going to hit some lows on these hunts. And it's like, you can keep your energy up. If you're into animals and you're making stocks, it just feels like a matter of time. But boy, when you hit some lows on a hunt, when you miss a shot, when you mess up a bull because you took too many steps and you blow them out and you've been working so hard, like just being able to grab a hold of myself, pick myself back up and get back after it. Don't let myself sit in the misery or sit in this despair of like making a mistake or, and a perfect example was my first hunt of the year, that antelope. I missed a shot on an antelope. Sure, he got out of the way of my arrow, but I had worked for 3 days to get an opportunity at a buck I wanted to shoot, and my arrow did not hit its mark, and that antelope ran off without an arrow in it. And all of a sudden I got to start over and find another shooter buck, and he's out of the public that I'm hunting. I've just been there enough times where it's like, I almost looked at the positive. I'm like, well, I get to keep antelope hunting. It's not over with. Like, the fun hasn't ended, And so, like, I almost just spin it that way. And now I'm just back on the hunt. And I traveled 200 miles from where I missed that buck to finally kill another one. But I could have very easily given up that day. I only had one more day to hunt, or a day and a half to hunt. Would have been really easy to go, well, that was my chance. Maybe I'll just hang out here and go. But instead, I almost get more driven, or I want to prove myself. I know I can kill one of these things. So I just think, like, keeping that same energy, that same fired up attitude, even when I get sleep deprived, or when I'm down, or when I'm hiking 1,000,000 miles and I'm sore and I'm fatigued, just remembering, like, this is it for me. The fall comes and goes quick.
That's right. Hunting angry. That's what comes to mind. Yeah. We joked about that in the past, but that's ultimately, a miss, or maybe you're struggling. It just makes me that much more determined and gives me that much more drive. And essentially hunting angry. And when I hunt angry, watch out. Once you get a miss under your belt, or a failed stock, or like you did something silly and you blew a stock or blew a shot, and it's like, okay, now I'm pissed. Now it's time to get ultra serious. And usually it makes me more hyper focused and the next level of detail, and usually the hunt ends up good, right? You make a good shot, you turn something out of nothing, whatever the case may be. But that's just the roller coaster of bow hunting.
Up the intensity, up the focus, and you start driving harder for that success, or to find redemption, or to prove it that you can do it. Yeah, man, I think that definitely helps. And I think, a lot of this, starts and ends with the mind, and you have to keep the right attitude. But these mistakes can start to compound too. Is you make a mistake on a failed stock or something, and then you start rushing or pushing hard to get an opportunity, but almost start like shortcutting it. I think it's important to remember that on these stocks, on these opportunities, you really have to try to be at your best. And you are going to be tired and sleep deprived, but just trying to keep that clear head and that focus to like be able to slow down at the right spots. Like ultimately it's going to come down to these instincts and these decisions you make in the end that's going to determine whether or not you're a good enough bow hunter to get in bow range and put a perfect arrow through these animals. So I think you got to wash the misses, wash the failed stocks, and go, okay, I got to get back to it here. Like I got to really focus in, and I got to make my absolute best play. Like I'm not going to walk this open park below this buck so I can hurry up and get around him because he might see me. Or I'm not going to stand up and walk at this buck. I think I'd rather get down and crawl where he has no chance of seeing me between the limbs. Or just like these little things of trying to keep a clear head and still try to make these really good decisions, because they can start to compound, and then you start to mess up not only one stock, but two stocks, 3, 4, 5, and you just start like running by the seat of your pants, and you want it so bad that my mistakes start compounding. So I think hunting angry is a good thing. You do want to be driven. You do want to push for success, but just make sure that you're keeping your focus, you're keeping a clear head, and you're making good decisions.
Yeah, it's hunting angry and hunting reckless are not the same thing. You do not want to hunt reckless like what you're describing.
Yep.
And so it's very controlled, right? And we're joking. I say it jokingly, hunting angry, but it's just a very determined, hyper-focused method or whatever, just the mood that you get into. And it's amazing too that every hunt, every stock, you might be in a different mood. You might be just because of life in general or what your mood is for the day, or the weather can affect the mood that you're in. But on days that things seem hard, or you're several days into it, you start to get frustrated, right? That's normal. But if you can turn that into a positive thing, like you've illustrated so much, once again, we're back to where we were. That's the difference. That's what makes the difference. Mm-hmm. So speaking of, and kind of changing gears, but this has really sparked some curiosity on my end. So we find ourselves second, third week of September. What are some of the hurdles that you're finding yourself in? Like in the past, like this has happened to me year after year. I know I'm going to reach these hurdles every single year. And one for me, by the third week of September, for example, the elk have left where I've been hunting them, and they're somewhere else, and I find myself starting over. That's so common with elk hunting, right? Whether they left because of pressure, maybe predators, maybe a snowstorm, weather. But that's probably the biggest hurdle to public land elk hunting. Would you agree? What do you think?
Yeah.
After the third week, what are you finding?
Yeah, same thing that you just mentioned. As soon as you stated it, I started to think back of last elk season and the challenges I faced. And I think you're right. I think, I was into elk there to start with, and I was getting some chances. I actually had, 4 different encounters or bulls that I was shadowing or trying to make plays on, and it just didn't quite come together for a satellite bull one, or maybe the cows saw me, or whatever the case is. And so I was playing the game, but I couldn't quite make it come together. It just never quite closed. I never released an arrow, and I was close, and I was chasing bugles. It was really exciting. But then pretty soon, it's these spots that I've been hunting are void of elk.
Yeah.
And so I find myself having to find a backup plan. And that's where, when you talked earlier, having these different plans of where you're going to go and what you're going to do, but it almost feels like you're lost now. The couple places I've been hunting that has been producing consistent encounters are now done with. So now I find myself starting at square one in the third week of September. And so, like you, I think that is the biggest challenge. Like the key to killing elk is being into elk. And so, you've got to go find some more, and their habits are changing. I notice, like, as it starts to get later in September, they start dropping in elevation. They hold in different places. So I think those same rules apply. You've got to start over. But I think you just got to start to theorize and think of your head, where are bulls, or where am I going to go look for bulls? And for me, last year, it ended up, I had hunted them out, couldn't find bulls. My cameraman left, and I was still into it. I actually jumped on a podcast and recorded it. It's like a good one to listen to if you guys want to listen to it, because you'll hear my headspace and where I'm at. And I just talked on that podcast, like, I just got to continue to grind. I will earn an opportunity every free day. I've got to be out there. Like, it will happen. So you can hear this mindset that I had and what I was doing. And it wasn't but a few days later, and I arrowed a bull. Now, it wasn't the first place I went to go look. I had an idea where these elk were. I hiked in there. I found some scrapes, some sign, didn't hear anything bugle, didn't run into any that day. And it's like, okay, well, that is what it is. And I got back down to the truck, and I'm driving down the gravel road at night. And I'm just starting to stop in these strategic spots where I found elk before, and I get out and I just listen. And sure enough, I got to one of those spots, and I heard a good bull bugle up on the hill. And it's an hour into dark, and I'm heading down to camp. And it's like, okay, got one for the morning. Then in the morning, I'm starting in the dark at 4:30 in the morning, and I start heading up, and I can hear him bugling up above me. And I'm trying to position myself right with the thermals and the directionals, and I'm able to creep in, make good moves, and then put a solid arrow through the heart of that bull. But it just, like, keep theorizing, keep moving forward. Even if you have a couple days of not seeing elk, like, just keep your head in the game. Like, you just need a sliver of opportunity, and you can create it. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do when you're not finding elk, or what's your go-to, or what's your mind space when you're there?
Yeah, I think what I took from that last description is you had previous knowledge of that unit, right? And that's so powerful. If you can get back to the same area year after year, your odds are going to go up so much, because what you knew elk use this area. And so you stopped in these high likely areas in the dark to listen for bugles, probably because of experience from the past, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that ultimately was the game changer. And so I think that's very important. And one thing, I do enjoy hopping around different unit to unit every year. And I enjoy learning units, and I enjoy seeing new country, but it's not the smartest thing to do. It's what I enjoy, but it's definitely not the smartest thing to do. So I just want to make sure too that people don't think that I'm just flying by the seat of my pants with no plan in these areas. If I'm hopping around to an area, it's because I've done some homework, or maybe I've hunted in there with a buddy from the past, or got some past intel. But starting with something to have some prior knowledge or information to add to your toolbox moving forward, I think that's so important. And so going into these hunts, and this year in Wyoming, this is the third year that I'm going back into my spot. And once again, this is a huge advantage. So all of a sudden, plan E, F, G, H, and I are easier. They come easier, right? Because you kind of understand what's going on in a unit now. You understand what these elk do. You understand how they act under hunting pressure or predator pressure. And then in Montana, I've hunted up there a couple times too with my brother. It's been 4 years ago, but I know the program, and I've done the homework, and I've talked to landowners, and I've talked to hunters in the past. And so I have all these tools that just make everything so much easier, because it's so easy to formulate a plan and a C, E, F, G, plan beyond that. And so I think that's probably one of the most important things, even more important than just hunting skills itself, but is being resourceful. We keep looping back to this, but that's how important it really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're spot on. Like, working knowledge of these units, I'm always expanding my knowledge in different places. So I killed that bull last year in an area where I knew elk were, but I was chasing a bull in a new area that I hadn't found before, that I expanded my knowledge. And I think if you don't have working knowledge, or you do feel lost, like, just start to come up with a plan, and every morning and night put yourself in good elk country on a good vantage or a good listening point, and now you just got to locate them again, And so I'm going to start morning and night. I'm just starting to hike up, and so I can think, as you asked me, like, my challenges with the hunt, I can go back to the year before, and what I did is, it wasn't previous knowledge, but it wasn't previous knowledge like years prior. It was previous knowledge of that year. I chased a 6-point bull on the left side of the canyon, this huge canyon, and I had seen elk way down in this right low spot of the canyon. And then, that was the end of my hunt or close to it. I got close to a 6-point bull, had to go back to work. So the next weekend, kind of heat check some spots. So hiking in, listening, looking, trying to locate elk, didn't see anything. And I'm like, well, what about those elk I had seen last weekend way down on this canyon on the right side? I never went down there and chased those ones. Okay, that's where I'm hunting this evening. So I dropped down in there, and sure enough, heard a bull bugle, went over the hill as a nice 6-point bull, made my play down in there and got an arrow in him. So I think using previous knowledge of the unit, but just being able to go just keep thinking like an elk. Okay, I'm going to hike into this spot this morning. If I don't find them, I can either continue on, I'll camp here, or I'll come back and now I'm going to go to this area. So just having all these areas, and you can do this before you go on your hunt. Just be making yourself all these places where you think good drainages, where good vantage points, where you think elk are going to be. And this is going to give you options where you're not lost in your tent at dark, wondering, where the heck am I going to go? I always have a million spots that I want to go check out, that I want to go. And I think it's just starting to check those off the list morning and night to try to locate elk, using the dark to locate elk, just doing whatever you can do. And even one of my tricks is I will glass from 5 miles away. I'll glass from the valley floor, and I'll glass up one evening or one morning, and I'll just try to find elk numbers. And I can't tell how big the bull is, but all of a sudden I can start to see elk on these distant faces. Now I know there's elk in there. Now I can go in the morning, and now I can go see what's going on. And elk like being around other elk. So a lot of times I'm just thinking outside the box, and I'll take a hunt and I'll just glass from afar, won't even go into a spot or something like that. I think just thinking outside the box and doing that stuff.
That's spot on. And whether you're in the beginning of a hunt or you've struck out multiple times and you're trying to find elk again, that's where I find myself, right? Back to a master vantage, using that spotting scope and using that sun at your back, whether it's in the morning or the evening, because you can see an elk through a spotting scope from a long ways away, 3, 4, 5 miles, like you said, 2 miles, no problem. But that's where you find yourself, starting from scratch maybe, and finding a master vantage and getting up there and spending the time during the prime time, morning and evening, the last hour of light, the first hour of light. And that's every hunt, I would say, unless I'm lucky, unless I tag out early, I'm going to be finding myself at a master vantage further along down in my hunt, because that's where it's come to, because I've struck out. But ultimately, that's how you find them. Those master vantages, super important.
Oh, it's so true, man. Yeah, searching out those master vantages that show off an immense amount of country. And you usually don't find them right below you. You find them a long ways away, but that gives you a clue to where the elk are at. I also like ridge lines that I can get up, and maybe I've got a vantage point, but then I can hunt my way for that morning hunt for that hour, 2 hours up that ridge line, grabbing other vantages along the way for 5-10 minutes here, 5-10 minutes there, and make this hunt up this ridge line and even cover different angles and more country. I'll find myself doing that as well. Do you hunt that way as well?
100%.
Yeah.
The dynamic master vantage.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because you can move and you're hunting along the way and still covering X amount of, more country exponentially along the way. And just so that example right there, not only are you giving yourself an option or a chance in the long play by finding them at distance, but you're also giving yourself a chance in the short play by covering that country during the prime time on a ridge line. And it doesn't take much. It only takes one. You can go from, nothing to tagged out in a minute, 30 seconds. It happens really quick. It doesn't take much. Just one little dip over the rim, and you get a bull to pipe off, and it can be over pretty quick. So those are the types of situations that I love to find myself in. I love to be in, because not only do I have a chance, I'm gaining knowledge at a distance, but I also have a chance or giving myself an opportunity in the immediate future right now in front of me.
And it's that ability to grind, to continue to put forth that effort day in, day out.
Yeah.
It's a test of endurance. You're not going to find them on your first day, or I mean, maybe you are, but I'm just like, the duration of these hunts seem to stretch on to where you got to continually keep your head in the game and then just keep covering this country and giving yourself a chance. And there's a lot of elk seasons that I've had. We get a 6-week season or 5-6-week season in Montana, but there's a lot of elk seasons I've had 20 days into hunting elk, try to kill a 6-point bull. That's a lot of days of not seeing them as well. I have full days where I go hunt a ridgeline, hunt a master vantage point, and I don't see an elk, and now I got to come up with my next play, my next move. Like, it is common to not see any elk on a hunt. I would also say that sometimes when you see a herd elk, maybe it isn't a bull you want to shoot, a lot of times I'll go over there anyways, because elk like being around other elk and the party can be over there. Or I'm a guy that chases bugles as well. All of a sudden, if I'm on a ridgeline and I hear a bugle down off into the canyon, it's like, does he sound big? Does he sound small? Like, sure, I want to like test the waters, but a lot of times I go down and drop down for that bugle, and all of a sudden I find myself in 2 or 3 bulls bugling around, or the bull that is bugling is a good one. But I try not to judge bulls on their bugle too much. Now, I can kind of tell age class. I can kind of tell what they sound like. Of course, I always want to tell myself it's a big bull when I hear him bugle, but I'm also a bugle chaser as well. I want to go get eyes on him and go see. If I can hear a bull bugle, that's a play, and I'm into elk. So usually I'll go for it and drop down in there. Are you the same?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's kind of the ace in the hole. If you see 1, 2, 3 elk, maybe it's just cows, maybe it's a small bull and a cow at a long distance away, I'm probably going to end up over there because, it's the 3rd week of September, 4th week of September. They're a herd animal. It's the rut. Odds are a big herd or more elk are going to be over there that aren't visible, and you're going to find yourself in a really sweet spot. But that being said, I think there's exceptions too, in some of these units that have, just lower densities or maybe high hunting pressure. You do find, a couple cows here and a couple cows there with spikes or a young bull, and that's it. I mean, there's always those anomalies, but in any of these units that have, decent numbers, that's usually not going to be the case. Mm-hmm. So yeah, bugle chasing, finding a cow elk or, something small that's not a target animal, you can bet I'm going to be over there to try to make something happen or find the main herd or another bull or whatever the case may be. 100%.
Yep. Yeah. Elk sure like being around other elk. And it, like you say, it isn't always true. And sometimes I see a herd of cows and a bull I don't want to shoot, and it isn't worth the effort to get over there. But a lot of times if you go over there, you will find more elk or search over the next hill. And there's nothing like being into an elk party. It's like when you can really find the party of elk, that's when elk die. I mean, I've killed a lot of groups where there's just a group of cows and a bull. But sometimes, even I was chasing a great bull last year, and I was on him for a couple days and about killed him, had a close call, and spooked a satellite bull into the herd, and then he kind of took the herd. They went over the hill. And then so I try to shadow them and keep over and see where they're going to end up. It's getting late. It's getting dark. But then they went over into another canyon, and there was another big herd bull that was bugling with that bull like over the next canyon. So they usually, if there's a bull in there, there's other elk around somewhere in that vicinity or in that area. If one elk likes it, usually more elk like it, it seems like.
Yeah, and especially in a situation like that, if they're not winding you, you can get away with bumping elk. I mean, I'm not saying go do it, but like if you bump a herd or something, and especially if there's more elk in the area, it's actually kind of surprising how quick they settle back down. And it's almost like if they run into other elk, they have that sense of security with calm elk, and they calm down quicker. Have you found the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's common knowledge, or you'll even hear me say it. It's like, oh, elk spook and they go to the next county, And a lot of times I can't keep with them or figure out where they went. And after I spook an elk, like that's it. I can't relocate them. But there has been times when I've spooked elk or busted them, and they start moving, and I just try to keep with them, like almost like a madman, like almost jogging to keep up. And I get just over the rise and just throw out my binos, and I see them going over the next rise. And so then I drop down into that canyon, and then I come just up over the rise, and then I catch them again, or I hear them bugle. And so all of a sudden I'm just trying to keep with these elk, And I've traveled a mile, 2 miles with them, and I've actually got them to calm back down and be an elk, and they actually start rutting behavior again, and now they're in a new pocket in there, and now that's where they're living, and maybe I get another play that morning, but definitely that evening I know where elk are and know where they put away, and I just spooked the hell out of that bull 2 miles ago, but now I'm still on them. So a lot of times you can keep with elk that you bump too and end up where they end up. Not all the time, but it does happen.
Yeah, and it's really sometimes a blessing in disguise when they move locations. I don't know about you, but I've found myself in spots before where there's elk there, and maybe there's a target bull that I have in there, but I just can't get him killed for some reason, and usually it's because of the terrain. It's just not quite right. It's just not quite in my favor. But then we move or I relocate, and sometimes that's all it takes. It's just, you just can't get the wind right in a certain spot. But that's why the elk are there. They know that because the wind's in their favor, or it just swirls so much that they can smell danger coming. But I have found that a lot too. If I ever find myself in a situation where I'm trying to kill the herd bull or whatever target bull for maybe 3 or 4 days, it's probably time to move. How do you know when to move? That's the other question too. I do not like leaving elk to go look for other elk, but at some point, if you just can't get that wind to cooperate, whether you wait for a weather change or find new elk, I mean, that's a tough one too.
That is tough. Yeah. I live a lot by those words you're saying is don't leave elk to find elk, but I'll find myself repeating that mantra as I'm moving to go find other elk as well. It's like I think it's just instincts, and the key to killing elk is being into elk. So if I'm into elk, I'm usually going to continue to hunt that spot. My time to move is when I can no longer find a shooter bull, or it's no longer happening in there, or if I'm getting ready to move, I might find myself being more aggressive with the herd or trying to make a move in a play. So usually if I'm moving, it's because I'm no longer into elk. But I've also ran into a scenario where I'm hunting them in the thick timber and they're putting away early and they're not bugling during the day. And it's like, all of a sudden I just find myself beating my head into the wall or against the wall. And then I move to more open classic elk country, or classic a broken open terrain. And then I kill a bull the very next day because it's better terrain. So when do you know when to move? That is a tough one. So I've been right there with you where I'm hitting my head against the wall. I've hunted a spot for 3-4 days. The elk are still in there. I'm still finding it. I just can't get one killed. And then I'll just go to some high mountain spot and I'll go in there. It's better terrain. It's more like open country. And all of a sudden I'll kill a bull. So yeah, I guess you got to factor that in as well, that if they're in really difficult terrain, sometimes you got to just take a chance, and you can always go back there and hunt them again if they're still in there. But yeah, sometimes you do just need a change of terrain and country, I think, too.
I can think of a couple instances where that same thing has happened to me too. And I've kind of I've got sucked into hunting them. I've got sucked into committing to 4 or 5 days into hunting this spot, but I can't get them killed because it's the wind or whatever. But I almost find that in the 3rd or the 4th week of September as well, they get pressured from other areas and they end up in these spots that they have that advantage on hunters on, whether it's they can just see you coming or they can smell you easier because the wind's so swirly. But it's they know about these pockets that are safe because they have these things like this that are in their favor. And they know that. This is my theory anyway. They know that. So after 4 or 5 days, or maybe I bumped them a few times and they're, maybe it's slowing down for action in there anyway, pick up camp, move all the way out, looking at what I have for options, and then hiking back all the way into another area or getting into another area via dirt bike or bicycle or whatever. Get in there, find elk, and get one killed before you even set up camp. That's happened twice to me. And sometimes that's all it takes. You think you're the worst elk hunter in the world because you can't get one freaking killed in this spot, and there's a good number of elk, but you just can't figure it out. You can't get one killed. Sometimes that is the best thing to do, is just pick up and start from scratch.
Yeah.
And it's just a weird place to be in, because how do you know when that time is? Mm-hmm. But it's funny. It's funny. You can go from just being a turd, can't kill anything, to glory tag punched in a matter of minutes.
So true, man. I'd see it with elk or with antelope and mule deer as well.
Yeah.
Antelope especially. I'll be just beating my head against the wall trying to hunt them in these flats, and I'm trying to use any topography. Can't get them killed. I'm busting them. And then I'll go into this, topography rich or all these canyons and coulees and folds and drainages, and all of a sudden I kill an antelope, So, yeah, it is... The country can lend itself to you just as much as being into the animals can. So yeah, I think sometimes, you got to use your critical thinking, and sometimes you do have to just pick up and move on and start over and go find some different elk to go hunt, because it just isn't going to happen in the same spot. My buddy Dylan Ness, he's a good friend of mine. He killed a bomber of a bull last year. He's been hunting this spot for 2 years, and he said he can never get one killed in there. He chases some giant elk and he gets sucked in like you're talking about, and he hunts this place with all this cover in there, and he's in there and he just almost had the bull and just bust him. And then so last year he just picked up and went up and left the spot, exactly what we're talking about, and went to some of this other terrain that we hunt. It's a spot I know well, and went in there, and he just killed a slammer of a bull, a 350-plus bull, just his first evening in there, just because he changed locations and topography instead of just beating his head against the wall in that thick stuff or in the tight canyons where he couldn't glass him or couldn't make a good play. So you're right, man. It has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and I think that brings up another good point, too, is the first day is your best chance. The first day into a new spot, whether you spend 5 days in some place or you plan on spending 2 or 1 or whatever, but the first day is your best chance. Once you've been around an area, your wind's been wafting around, they slowly will, even if you're hunting carefully, they're slowly going to pick up on human presence, right? And so that's what I would say too to that, and that probably lends to why we've had so many situations where we've picked up one area and then went into a new area and got one killed, because I truly believe that you go in somewhere fresh, the elk haven't been messed with, it's your first time encountering them, and you kill. Sometimes it's just like that, but I think there's something to that.
I have never thought about that until you just said that, about how your first day you're most effective in there. And sometimes I'll try to slow play it a little bit at the first day, but as you mentioned that, as I can think back to spots, it never hunts like the first day. The first day can be epic hunting. Maybe you don't even bust any elk. It seems like it's always changing for the worse or getting like a touch tougher every day that goes on. And I don't know that means to be super aggressive the first day. I definitely we're always riding that line between aggressiveness and recklessness. And when you're trying to kill a bull, I want to make plays and give myself a chance to try to kill him. So, I don't know that I'm going super aggressive or anything like that, but you're totally right. When I first find an elk spot, when I first get into a zone with a bunch of elk in it, your best chance to kill them is that first day in that zone for some reason. And it just gets progressively tougher and tougher from there, even though it should be getting easier and easier because you're learning it, you're learning what the elk do, but you're spot on with that assessment. And
how many times have you found yourself after day 3 or 4, you're just like, oh, if I just would have done this like on day 1, like if I would have been, did this, but I didn't know because this is the first time I've been in here, or this is my first day hunting, or whatever the case may be. Circling back to why hunting the same spots, if they're the same, elk hunting still elk hunting. Just because a spot's good one year doesn't mean it's going to be good the next. But there is power in that, on knowing how to hunt a spot, because most of my hunting career, especially if I leave a spot unsuccessful, I end up being, man, if I just would have done that on day 1, or I would have hunted that a little bit different, but I didn't know. Hindsight's 20/20, right? But I didn't know. And I find myself in situations like that a lot. But that's hunting. That's the dance of bow hunting.
Yeah. Knowing the terrain that you're hunting. I find that with mule deer a lot too, is if I've been on a stalk in there, if I've spent time in there, it's like, you walk away going, gosh, if I would have known this, I would have approached this way or would have came in this way. And if I ever get another stalk in that country, having that knowledge of like, oh, I've been there before. I know what it looks like. I know which way I need to approach. So you're right, that historic knowledge year to year and hunting those places, it does give you a major leg up, because you almost always walk away from an unsuccessful stalk and there's something different or a different approach approach, or maybe I should have gone through the timber, stayed back on this ridge, or dropped down in here. There's always something that you could have done just a little bit different if you would have had knowledge of the terrain in the country, or knowledge of where the elk like to go and what they like to do. But by the time you know that information, it's like too late for that year. Or maybe you do catch another one in there, but it almost has to be like the previous year's knowledge. And then you go in there and there's elk in the same spot, and it's like, oh, I played this game. Like, I know the terrain. I know what these elk want to do. And it's almost like you're a leg up on them. You know, you know what's going to happen.
Some of the deer hunting here in Wyoming is exactly that. Like, I've found myself making stalks to the same trees from previous years, just because of the historical beds, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of time with like mule deer hunting, you spend all this time behind glass, and you're staring at the hillside, and you're picturing, you know, what this tree looks like when you're there. Not just looking at it from a mile and a half away, but it's amazing how different things look when you actually get over there compared to when you're looking at it from, you know, a vantage across the way through a pair of binos or a spotting scope. It's wildly different. And so that's why it's so powerful. Back to the same spots year after year, especially for stuff like that. Yeah, gone to the same tree, you know, from past failures, and being like, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. I've already done this stock before. I've killed a buck doing that too.
No kidding.
Over there. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm going back to a place that I've mule deer hunted quite a bit and chased some big bucks, and I've killed quite a few bucks in this unit. I think I've killed 3 good bucks in this unit, one great big one. And so I've got a lot of historic knowledge. I've actually got a drainage where I've seen big bucks in, and I've never went for them because it's too sketchy and cliffy to get over there. I don't know a way in to come from the top. And so, you know, I've been studying my maps pretty hard of how I'm going to circle around and get into this historic drainage where I've seen bucks before and how I'm going to kill one. But yeah, I mean, I may just find a buck in similar locations, because these bachelor herds of bucks, they hang in the same spots, they bed in the same groups of trees. And man, if you've been there and made a play before, you've got such a leg up on these bucks. You just know how to play your stalk and how to get in close and where you can shoot from. So yeah, man, that's absolutely huge. And elk too, catching them in the same drainages and kind of knowing what they want to do and where they want to head. Yeah, that's huge. And paying attention to escape routes of elk. Yeah. You know, like all of a sudden, if you bust elk and it's like, gosh, they went out that saddle in there, you know, maybe you won't play it that way next time, but you kind of know where they want to escape from. Or, you know, I've also seen pressure. Somebody may have the stalk in front of me, and you can set up on an escape route, you know, where they're going to come through. I don't find myself doing that a whole lot, as I kind of like to have, you know, if I find elk, you know, usually I'm the only one on them. Elk don't like to be where human pressure is. So a lot of times where you see humans is not where you see the elk at. They get pressured to somewhere. But I think I can remember talking to like Matt Bateman and Kip Fowler. Like, they hunt a lot on the Wasatch Front that's really heavy pressure. And so a lot of times they're not even going to make a stalk on the buck because there's enough pressure around that somebody will see it, make a stalk, and they'll play like the escape routes. And they've done good. I mean, they've killed a bunch of big bucks. So like they'll do that. I can remember that. I remember hunting 2 guys. I remember putting a buddy on an escape route, and then I'd go make the stalk, almost like giving ourselves 2 chances at a buck. And it just happened that I was on the stalk and ended up killing the buck. But he would have came out this main trail where my buddy was stationed to kill him if I hadn't killed the buck. So I can remember doing that before.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge, that past experience. I think this is the first year, too, that all of my hunts, like, I've been there before. I've hunted it before. I know what to expect. I mean, granted, this is a different year, different moisture level, a lot of moisture this year for the most part. So you don't know exactly how many animals are going to be there, what's going to be there, but that's just such a big advantage. You know, all these spots are places I'm familiar with. And I can't wait in that regard, because it's just, I have such an upper hand, just like you will in Colorado.
Yep. Yeah, that experience in those locations is huge. And you don't always, it's not always what you expect. And I want to expand my knowledge in these locations as well and learn more and cover new spots that I haven't been. But yeah, it is huge. And I think as a bow hunter, you do have to start to learn these core units or core areas that you like to hunt and like to go back to. And then expanding your knowledge in those units, and then sometimes those units don't produce, and now it's time to look for a new spot. Or you're adding a new hunt into those where it's like, okay, I'm going to hunt this spot that I know for mule deer, and this spot I know for elk, but for late season mule deer, it didn't really produce last season. I'm going to a new area, and you start to build this repertoire of units and areas that always expanding your knowledge in those areas, and then looking for new ones when they change. But it's like this constant rotation of like hunting units and areas and places, both exploring and using previous knowledge.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, cool. Well, right on, man. It's time to get after it. It's season, so let's leave it all on the field and go have some fun and chase some critters around.
Heck yeah, got some days left and hunts to be on, and so I'm gonna make each and every day like it's the last.
Yeah, man, that's it. Me too. All right, sounds good, man. Good hunting. We'll catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. See you on the next one.
Good.